Welcome to a new week of Daily Thoughts. This week I'd like us to think about what's called the Lord's Prayer, the prayer that begins, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name." It's perhaps the most well-known prayer in the Bible, and for many Christians they would use it all over the world. Christians would use this prayer every single day and they would repeat it. There are two versions of it. There is one version in Matthew's Gospel and one in Luke's Gospel. The one in Matthew's Gospel is part of a much longer address given by Jesus, known as the Sermon on the Mount. But the version that we have in Luke's Gospel is given by Jesus in response to a request made by his disciples. And perhaps Jesus suggested this prayer, gave this prayer to his disciples on more than one occasion. And this morning I want us to start off by looking at Luke's version and the way that the prayer came about. And at the beginning of Luke chapter 11, this is what we read. One day Jesus was praying in a certain place, and when he finished, one of his disciples said to him, "Lord, teach us to pray." And I've always been struck by those verses. Jesus' disciples were grown adults who had probably prayed all their lives. They were Jews who would have prayed at the synagogue, as well as being surrounded by prayer in their homes as they grew up. And yet here they were, grown men, saying to Jesus, "Lord, teach us to pray." Here was something different that they had never encountered before that prompts this request. And that tells me a number of things. First of all, prayer is something that can be taught. Lord, teach us. Prayer is something that can be taught. And in some ways, it has to be taught. Prayer does not come naturally to us. We have to learn this. It has to be taught. And even those who have been Christians a long time still struggle with prayer. We're always learning, always needing to be taught. And if you're wondering where to start in your prayer life, then here's a good place to begin. Lord, teach me. Teach me to pray. I want to pray. I long to pray, but I don't know how. I'm open to learning. Secondly, if we want to learn about prayer, then Jesus is the master. There is no better teacher. Notice what it is that prompts this request by the disciples. One day Jesus was praying in a certain place, and when he finished, one of his disciples said to him, "Lord, teach us to pray." They asked that question, they made that request having witnessed Jesus praying himself. And they had no doubt seen and heard dozens of people praying over the years, but here was something different. And I wonder what it was that they observed that day as they watched Jesus praying. Was it his intensity? Was it the words that he used? Did he just seem so natural at it? There was clearly something that prompted them to ask, "Lord, teach us. We want to know how to pray like that. We want to know how to pray like you do." And then thirdly and finally, I think we should detect a real desire for a better prayer life in the hearts of these disciples. As I said a moment ago, they were familiar with prayer. It was part of their religious upbringing. It wasn't as if this was the first time that they had seen and heard anyone praying. They were used to hearing the rabbis praying. They would no doubt make their own attempts at prayer. But suddenly, there is a sense of inadequacy in what they have known. They're no longer content with the familiar prayer patterns that they had grown up with. They wanted more. They wanted to go deeper. I like to think that there's an urgency in their request to Jesus. "Lord, would you teach us to pray like that? Please, would you teach us?" So as we prepare to look at this prayer that Jesus gave them this week, let's adopt that same longing to learn, that same desire to go deeper in our experience of prayer. And may the Lord teach us how to pray. Amen.